Hi, boys and girls. Thanks for tuning in for another story from Pastor Joe. I want to tell you this story that I just learned about an angry lady on the crowded city bus. You know how, have you ever ridden in a bus? Not the school bus kind, but the kind that drive around the city all the time? Well, many of these buses go all over, and people who don't have cars or people whose cars are in the at the mechanics being fixed or something, they ride the city bus. And the city bus is a really good way of getting around the city. Well, there are some cities where it's so crowded to drive your car on the streets that it takes forever to get there from one place to another. And so many people, because of how crowded the streets are, many people just take the bus. And you've probably seen people waiting at a bus stop, and they wait their turn, and then the bus eventually comes, because the bus is always driving around, just stopping here, picking up people, driving a little ways, dropping off some people, picking up more people, going on, and that's how the bus works. And it's always on a schedule, and it's always going the same direction, depending what bus you get on. And they go all over town that way. And so you just have to know which bus to get on, and you get on the bus and you ride it where you need to go. Well, in one of these cities, I don't know what city it was a very crowded city, and many people rode the bus. Did you see the picture of the inside of that bus at the front of this video? The people, there were not enough seats for everyone to sit in, and so they have to stand up, and they expect people to have to do that. And so they put little handles, they put big bars, something to grab onto, so when the bus stops or starts or turns or something, you can hang on to something and you don't go falling one way or another. Well, that's just the way it is in many of these city buses. When they get too crowded, they'll let people get on as long as there's room to stand at least. But you hope that you'll get a seat, because it's no fun standing in a moving bus, as you can imagine. And maybe you've already done that on a trip here or there with your parents. So this is a story of what happened on a busy, crowded city bus. All right? A lady and her two small children got onto a crowded city bus. And she was accustomed to seeing certain people on that bus, because each day, many days, she got on at this certain time, and so did all those other people. They were riding to appointments, or they were riding to work or back from work, wherever they were going. And so many times people would see each other and they recognized each other. Maybe they didn't know each other, maybe they didn't talk to each other, but they recognized people who rode the bus the same time that they did, right? This lady and her two children stepped up onto the bus. And they looked around, and there were some familiar faces they saw, and it was a very busy bus, and none of the seats were available. And here this lady and her two small children had to stand. Well, the lady noticed a certain young teenage boy who was sitting in a special seat. On city buses, some of them have a special seat that's especially for disabled people, people who can't walk well, people who might be blind, people who might even be deaf, people who have some physical problem that makes it hard for them to get around. And these seats are reserved specially for them. So if you're riding the bus, you're not even allowed to sit in that seat, even if it's empty. Only people who have a disability, who have a physical problem, can sit in those seats. And what should this lady see but a teenage boy sitting there looking at his phone? He had his ball cap on. He had a good-looking shirt on, some nice new jeans, and some nice sneakers on. And he didn't look like a homeless kid or anything. He just looked like a cool dude, And there he was sitting in a disabled seat, not allowed to sit there. And this lady was thinking, wow, this is a crowded bus. I wish I didn't have to stand. I'm carrying bags and purses and things, and I have my 2 kids, and I sure wish I could sit down. But she looked and she saw this teenager who was sitting in what she figured was the wrong seat. He shouldn't be allowed to sit there because it was for disabled kids or people, whether they were grown-ups or kids. Well, she started looking at him. You know how some people give you the eye? They say they give you the eye. They started looking at you. And she was looking at him. Well, the teenager looked up and he saw her, and he went back to looking on his phone, and she wasn't able to communicate right to him that he shouldn't be sitting there just by looking at him. You know, she was hoping he would get the hint. You know, and he didn't move. He didn't say anything to her, and she didn't say anything to him. Another passenger was noticing this. He saw that the lady looking sternly at the teenage boy in the seat for the disabled people, and he watched to see what she would do. He was watching back and forth. He was watching to see if she would do something else, and if the teenage boy would do anything, and he looked back and forth. Pretty soon other people started noticing. They could tell that this lady was getting uncomfortable and unhappy with this young man who shouldn't be sitting in that seat at all. That was for special people with special needs, right? Finally, the lady spoke up. She was angry by now because he should have gotten the hint. And she said, "Young man, what are you doing in that seat? You have no business sitting in that seat. It's reserved for special people. At the very least, you should have gotten up out of that seat when I got on the bus with these 2 little children, and I had nowhere to sit, and I have to hold on to the pole here and rock around while the bus is moving. You should at least have been courteous enough to get out of your seat and allow me to sit there. Of course, I can't because it's only for people with special needs. And you should be out of that seat." And she kept talking to him, and her voice started getting louder and louder. And all of the people in the bus noticed, and they weren't sure, and they were kind of agreeing with her. Yeah, that young man shouldn't be in that seat. He thinks he's pretty cool. He's a good-looking kid, but that doesn't mean he can break the rules, you know. And so the people were kind of going, yeah, They were wondering as she was chewing out this teenage boy. Well, this one man that was watching all of this, he looked forward and he saw the bus driver. And the bus drivers, they have these big rear view mirrors that are up high so they can watch everything that's going on in their bus so that there are no problems, and so they can be aware of everything that's going on. And this man saw the bus driver looking up in his mirror and watching everything that was happening. The bus driver just kept going. I think the bus driver must have been ready to deal with it if it got out of control, because the lady's voice started getting louder and louder. "Who do you think you are, young man? You have no business even being on this bus. Why don't you walk where you need to go?" And she was just getting angrier and angrier and angrier on this crowded city bus. Finally, the young teenage boy spoke up. He stood up. He grabbed onto a pole to keep himself balanced, and he said to the lady, "Ma'am, do you know who I am?" And the lady said, "I don't know who you are, but you don't usually ride this bus right now, so I don't know where you came from, but you probably have no business being on this bus. You're probably up to no good." He said, "So you don't know who I am?" He said, while he hung on to the pole. She said, "No, I don't." He said, "Exactly, you don't know who I am. You don't know my name. You don't know anything about me, do you?" She said, "No, and I don't think I want to know anything about you." And he said, "Well, ma'am, I need to tell you about me." And then he reached down by the bottom of his jeans. Well, the man who was watching all of this, he was worried. Maybe this teenage boy has a knife, or maybe he has a gun. Maybe he's up to no good, but he's reaching for something down at the bottom of his pant leg, and the boy pulled down at the bottom of his pant leg, and the pant leg was somehow velcroed together. It was like you could open up the bottom of his pant leg. And he ripped, you know how Velcro makes a sound when you separate it? It went, right? And so he ripped it open and he pulled up his pant leg up past his knee. And you know what? The angry lady and all of the passengers on that bus saw? They saw that he was missing the bottom half of his leg. He didn't have the bottom half of his leg. He had lost part of his leg. They had to have surgery and take it off because it had some disease in it, and they had to take it off, or this disease would have spread throughout his whole body and killed him. So he had his leg amputated, and now in its place he had a piece of plastic or whatever they make fake legs out of. They call them prosthetics, and they attach to your leg, and then at the other end of it you can put a shoe, and it attaches to what's left of your leg, so you can kind of walk, and so that's what he had his pants covering. So nobody could have known that he was indeed disabled, and he couldn't get around very easily, and that's why he was sitting in that seat, right? Oh, the lady was very embarrassed, and she didn't want to say, "I'm sorry," but she finally found someone else got off the bus, and she found their seat, and she sat there with her two children, and the rest of the bus riders got quiet, and they felt bad. And finally another man went up to this teenage boy and said, "You know, that's the coolest looking fake leg I've ever seen. You know, my brother served in the war, and he had to lose his leg because he got shot at, or there was an explosion, and he lost his leg. Could I take a picture of your leg and show it to him? Or better yet, could maybe I bring him on the bus the next time you're on the bus? Because I'd love for him to see your fake part of your leg, because maybe he needs to get one like yours." And the teenage boy started feeling better, because after all, he'd been yelled at a long time, right? The Bible tells us, boys and girls, that we shouldn't judge other people just by how they look on the outside. Many of those people on the bus didn't judge that young teenage boy right, did they? They didn't know anything about him, and they didn't know that he was really disabled and he had a right to sit in that seat, right? We do that about other people too. We look at other people and we don't like what they look like, or we don't like things that they're saying, or we just don't like them, and we mistreat them. We get angry at them, or we don't want to be around them, or we talk about them to others. That's called misjudging them, right? We don't say the right things about them, and we think the wrong things about them. And the Bible says the Lord looks on the heart. Mankind, that's you and me, we all look on the outward appearance. And the Bible says, don't look on the outward appearance, look at their heart. And believe that they're good people first, before making any other judgment about them. All right? So that's our lesson today. Let's look at each other and treat each other more courteously and kindly before we jump to conclusions about what kind of people they are. Because that's what God does with us, right? He loves us so much. He looks at our hearts, not just at our hands and the things that we do with our hands. Doesn't look at our looks. He loves every one of us. He reads our hearts first of all. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope you have a great rest of the Sabbath, and I'll see you next time right here. Bye-bye, you guys. God bless you.